Ladies and gentlemen, there is a quiet engine inside each of us that dictates every decision we make, every action we take, and every direction our life moves toward. That engine is the mind, and the truth is simple. If you do not learn to control your mind will control you. Controlling your mind does not begin with force. It begins with awareness. Most people react to life on autopilot, repeating thoughts they never questioned and following emotions they never understood. But awareness is the moment you pause long enough to ask, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? Why am I choosing this? When you ask those questions, you take the first step from reaction to intention. We like to believe that external events shape our lives, but it's the story we tell ourselves about those events that truly shapes us. Two people can face the same challenge. One sees it as a dead end, the other as a beginning. The difference is not the situation, the difference is the mind, and the mind can be trained. Training your mind is like training a muscle. It requires consistency, repetition, and patience. When negative thoughts appear, you don't fight them. Fighting gives them strength. You redirect them. When fears whisper, you don't silence them. You question them. When doubt shows up, you don't run. You confront it with truth. Understand this. Control is not about suppression. Control is about direction. It is choosing the thoughts that serve you, the beliefs that empower you, and the focus that aligns with your purpose. Because whatever you focus on grows. Whatever you feed becomes stronger. The most successful people are not those who have perfect lives. They are those who have mastered the discipline of shaping their minds. They think on purpose. They choose their perspective. They respond instead of react. And because they control their mind, they control their path. If you want your life to change, start by changing the thoughts that lead it. Guide your mind with intention, with clarity, and with purpose, because when you control your mind, you unlock the ability to control your future. Your mind functions as the central processing unit of your life, continuously interpreting information, generating ideas, and deciding your course of action. Imagine it as an internal compass. Just as a compass guides a traveler through unfamiliar terrain, your mind guides your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors through the complexity of life. The direction it points is not random. It is shaped by your beliefs, your experiences, and the priorities you choose to give your attention. When you learn to consciously guide this compass, you gain the ability to navigate your life intentionally rather than drift passively along the currents of circumstance. Each thought you entertain acts like a needle on this compass, pulling your focus toward a specific path. If you allow unexamined fears, biases, or distractions to dominate, your life will veer off course, leading to habits and decisions that may conflict with your values or long-term objectives. Conversely, by cultivating deliberate awareness and purpose-driven thinking, you align the direction of your mind with your goals, ensuring that your daily actions consistently move you toward meaningful outcomes. The concept of the mind as an internal compass also emphasizes the importance of clarity. A compass provides value only when the traveler understands how to interpret it. Similarly, your mind requires clarity about what matters most to you. Without this clarity, even the most disciplined thoughts can become misdirected, leading to effort without impact. To achieve alignment, you must first identify your core values and define your purpose clearly. Once these are articulated, every thought and decision can be evaluated against this internal standard. For example, when faced with a challenging situation, a mind aligned with purpose automatically filters options through the lens of long-term objectives rather than reacting impulsively to immediate discomfort. This internal guidance system reduces confusion and indecision, creating a steady momentum toward personal and professional growth. Understanding your mind as a compass also highlights the significance of mental habits. Habits are repeated thought patterns that reinforce the direction your mind naturally points. Just as a compass needle can be magnetically influenced, your mind can be pulled repeatedly towards certain beliefs and behaviors if left unchecked. Positive habits, such as intentional reflection, strategic planning, and mindfulness, strengthen alignment between your internal compass and your desired outcomes. Negative habits, such as rumination, distraction, and self-doubts, cue the direction, often subtly, until they culminate in significant misalignment between where you are and where you want to be. Recognizing this relationship empowers you to consciously cultivate thought patterns that act as navigational aids rather than obstacles. The mind, as compass metaphor, also reinforces the interplay between thought and action. Your actions are the outward expression of the direction your mind points. Just as a compass guides footsteps along a path, your thoughts guide choices, responses, and behaviors. Misaligned thoughts often manifest as inconsistent actions. Procrastination despite knowing what is important, reacting emotionally rather than rationally, or pursuing goals that feel hollow or unfulfilling. In contrast, a mind aligned with purpose produces coherence between intention and action. Every decision, from the smallest daily choice to major life milestones, becomes an expression of internal guidance rather than external pressure. The more consistently you follow this internal compass, the more automatic and effortless alignment becomes, reinforcing the cycle of intentional living. Considering your mind as an internal compass encourages the development of self, trust, and resilience. External circumstances are unpredictable and often beyond your control, but your mental compass remains a stable instrument. Learning to guide your mind cultivates confidence in your own judgment and reduces dependence on external validation. You develop the ability to navigate setbacks and uncertainty without losing direction, because your internal compass points toward what truly matters, not merely what is urgent or popular. This stability allows you to make strategic choices, respond thoughtfully to challenges, and maintain progress toward long-term objectives regardless of temporary obstacles. In essence, guiding your mind transforms it from a passive processor of circumstance into an active architect of your destiny. Awareness is the fundamental prerequisite for any form of self-mastery. The mind operates continuously, generating thoughts, emotions, and impulses, most of which occur automatically and below the threshold of conscious attention. Without awareness, these mental processes act like an invisible current, pulling behavior in directions that may not align with your goals or values. Mastery over the mind begins not with effort or willpower, but with observation. By paying attention to what you are thinking, feeling, and prioritizing, you gain the first level of insight into the forces driving your behavior. Awareness allows you to recognize recurring patterns, identify triggers for unproductive habits, and detect biases or assumptions that distort perception. This recognition is essential because control is impossible without first understanding the terrain you wish to navigate. Trying to impose discipline on unobserved thoughts is like trying to steer a car without knowing which direction it is moving. Effort alone becomes inefficient and often counterproductive. Developing awareness requires deliberate practice. Mindfulness, reflective journaling, and structured self-inquiry are tools that help illuminate the workings of the mind. Observing thoughts without judgment creates a mental space where you can distinguish between constructive and destructive tendencies. For instance, noticing that a recurring fear consistently prevents action allows you to confront it consciously, rather than being unconsciously driven by it. Awareness also brings to light subtle influences on your mental state, including environmental cues, social pressures, and internalized beliefs. By recognizing these influences, you gain the ability to question their validity and to decide whether to accept, reject, or modify them. This level of insight transforms the mind from a reactive machine into an intentional instrument, capable of shaping outcomes rather than merely responding to circumstances. Understanding your thoughts is central to building discipline. Discipline is often misunderstood as rigid self-control or the ability to suppress impulses, but in reality, It is the alignment of actions with consciously chosen priorities. Without awareness, attempts at discipline are superficial and rely on willpower alone, which is finite and prone to failure. Awareness creates the foundation for sustainable discipline by allowing you to see where attention is being diverted and why. For example, noticing that procrastination arises from anxiety about failure enables a targeted response, addressing the underlying fear rather than merely forcing yourself to act. In this way, awareness transforms discipline from a coercive effort into a natural consequence of understanding your mind. The practice of awareness also enhances emotional intelligence. Emotions are not random. They are signals that reflect interpretations of internal or external events. Recognizing these signals allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. When anger, frustration, or self-doubt arises, awareness enables you to identify its source and assess whether it reflects reality or a distorted perception. This process creates a critical pause between stimulus and response, which is where true control emerges. The pause allows the mind to evaluate options, weigh consequences, and select a course aligned with long-term objectives rather than temporary impulses. Over time, this capacity to observe and regulate emotions strengthens, resulting in a more balanced, resilient, and intentional approach to life. Awareness also reveals the interplay between thoughts, beliefs, and habits. Many behaviors that seem automatic are driven by underlying assumptions that go unexamined. By bringing these assumptions into consciousness, you gain the power to challenge and reframe them. This reframing allows for the development of new mental habits that support your goals, such as replacing self-criticism with constructive reflection or shifting from reactive thinking to proactive planning. The process of observation, followed by deliberate adjustment, establishes a feedback loop in which awareness fuels growth and disciplined action reinforces greater awareness. Over time, this loop strengthens the ability to self-regulate across multiple domains of life. Awareness cultivates a sense of ownership and responsibility. When you notice how your thoughts influence your actions, you recognize that external circumstances do not dictate behavior. Internal responses do. This realization shifts the locus of control inward, empowering you to navigate challenges with autonomy and intentionality. Mastery of the mind, therefore, begins with the simple yet profound act of noticing, paying attention to patterns, impulses, and beliefs, and continues through the deliberate practice of guiding those observations toward constructive outcomes. Awareness precedes control because control without insight is blind effort, whereas insight enables precision, consistency, and alignment with purpose. The human mind is not a passive recorder of events. It is an active interpreter that constructs meaning from every experience. Every thought you entertain, every reflection you make, and every belief you hold contributes to the internal story you tell yourself. These narratives are the frameworks through which you perceive reality, guiding decisions, shaping habits, and influencing emotions. The stories you tell yourself can either limit or empower you, depending on their nature and accuracy. For example, viewing failure as proof of personal inadequacy creates fear, hesitation, and avoidance, whereas interpreting failure as feedback and opportunity fosters learning, resilience, and bold action. The narrative shapes not only perception but behavior. What you believe internally determines what you consider possible, what risks you are willing to take, and how persistent you are in pursuing goals. Changing the narrative, therefore, has the power to transform outcomes because it rewires the lens through which the mind filters every experience. Internal narratives often develop unconsciously, influenced by early experiences, cultural conditioning, and repeated patterns of thinking. Many people carry beliefs formed in childhood or adolescence without questioning their relevance to their current lives. These beliefs operate silently but exert tremendous influence, creating limitations that are mistaken for objective reality. Awareness of these internal stories is the first step toward transformation. By identifying recurring thoughts, self-criticisms, or unproductive assumptions, you uncover the scripts that have been silently guiding your behavior. Once exposed, these narratives can be examined critically. Are they factual or exaggerated? Are they empowering or restrictive? This reflection allows you to take ownership of the story you live by, recognizing that you are not a passive participant in life, but an active storyteller shaping the plot. The mind relies heavily on repetition and reinforcement, which is why narratives have such a profound effect. A story repeated often enough in the mind becomes a guiding principle, influencing choices and emotional responses without conscious thought. Positive narratives, such as seeing oneself as capable, adaptable, and resilient, create momentum toward success because the mind begins to interpret challenges as opportunities and setbacks as temporary. Negative narratives, such as believing that effort is futile or that mistakes define worth, generate self-fulfilling prophecies, limiting ambition and discouraging risk. Changing the story, therefore, requires intentional repetition of new narratives, affirming beliefs that support growth while gently dismantling those that hold you back. This process does not involve ignoring reality. Rather, it is about reframing experiences in ways that empower action and align with long-term goals. Shifting your internal narrative also impacts emotional regulation. Emotions are responses to the stories your mind tells. If the story is one of fear, inadequacy, or hopelessness, the emotional landscape becomes dominated by anxiety, frustration, or despair. By consciously rewriting the narrative to emphasize possibility, competence, and opportunity, you change the emotional tone of your inner life. This emotional shift, in turn, influences decision making, creativity, and resilience. When the mind anticipates success rather than failure, actions are taken with confidence and clarity. When setbacks occur, they are interpreted through a lens of learning rather than judgment, reducing stress and increasing adaptive responses. Over time, the new narrative becomes self-reinforcing. Empowered thoughts generate productive emotions, which drive constructive behavior, which further validates the empowering story. The process of transforming internal narratives also strengthens critical thinking and self-awareness. It encourages questioning long-held assumptions, analyzing evidence objectively, and considering alternative perspectives. By recognizing that narratives are constructed rather than absolute truths, the mind becomes flexible, capable of adapting to new circumstances, and resilient in the face of uncertainty. This flexibility is crucial for personal growth, as it allows for continuous recalibration of beliefs and actions in alignment with evolving goals and experiences. In addition, shaping your internal story fosters agency. Instead of attributing outcomes solely to external forces or chance, you recognize the role of your mindset and choices, increasing responsibility for results and empowering proactive behavior. The narrative you choose to live by directly influences the trajectory of your life. Thought patterns guide behavior, behavior shapes habits, and habits determine outcomes. The stories you tell yourself are not abstract. They are the blueprint for how you approach work, relationships, challenges, and opportunities. By consciously designing these stories, emphasizing possibility, growth, and resilience, you align your mental framework with the life you want to create. The mind responds to the narrative it believes in, and by choosing an empowering narrative, you effectively control the direction of your thoughts, actions, and ultimately, your results. The ability to shape your internal story is not a luxury. It is the mechanism through which true personal transformation occurs. Control over the mind is frequently misunderstood as the act of suppressing thoughts, emotions, or impulses, but true control is fundamentally different. It is not about silencing the mind or eliminating unwanted mental activity. It is about recognizing the vast array of thoughts that arise and consciously deciding which ones to prioritize, amplify, or act upon. The human mind generates thousands of thoughts daily, ranging from fleeting impressions to deeply ingrained beliefs. Attempting to block or suppress these naturally occurring mental processes is not only futile but counterproductive, because the act of suppression draws attention to the very thought you are trying to avoid. Instead, control involves cultivating the ability to observe all mental activity without attachment, discern which thoughts are constructive, and deliberately choose which ones to engage with. This perspective transforms mental discipline from a struggle against the mind into a cooperative, purposeful navigation of it. The principle of direction over suppression also emphasizes the importance of choice. Every thought that enters consciousness presents an opportunity to focus, to learn, to respond, or to ignore. Not all thoughts are valuable and not all deserve action, but the mind must be trained to distinguish between those that serve your purpose and those that distract. For example, a fleeting worry about a past mistake does not need to dominate attention unless it contains insights that can inform future decisions. By directing focus toward productive, purposeful thoughts, you harness the energy of the mind to serve goals rather than allowing scattered or negative thoughts to dictate mood and behavior. This act of selection is the essence of mental control. It does not deny the existence of unwanted thoughts, but prevents them from hijacking attention and guiding actions unconsciously. Understanding control as direction also reframes how challenges, distractions, and internal conflict are approached. Life presents countless stimuli that can trigger unhelpful mental patterns, such as fear, anger, doubt, or procrastination. A mind attempting suppression will expend energy resisting these impulses, often intensifying their presence and creating inner tension. A mind practicing direction, however, acknowledges the thoughts and emotions, evaluates their relevance, and decides how to respond in alignment with priorities. For instance, recognizing that anxiety about a future event is present allows you to convert that energy into preparation and planning rather than futile worry. Direction transforms mental activity into a resource for informed action rather than a source of conflict or paralysis. The concept of mental direction also applies to habit formation and behavior. Thoughts precede actions, and repeated engagement with certain thoughts strengthens neural pathways, reinforcing patterns of behavior. If the mind is left unchecked, habits often develop unconsciously, influenced by external stimuli and internal impulses. By consciously directing which thoughts are nurtured, you influence which behaviors become automatic. Choosing to focus on curiosity, problem solving, or constructive self-reflection strengthens behaviors aligned with personal goals, while ignoring or redirecting unhelpful mental patterns weakens habits that lead to stagnation or self-sabotage. Over time, this deliberate guidance creates an internal ecosystem where productive thoughts naturally dominate, making control a sustained, effortless process rather than a constant struggle. Direction over suppression also enhances emotional regulation. Thoughts and emotions are tightly interlinked, and unexamined thoughts often trigger emotional reactions that feel involuntary. Attempting to suppress emotions without addressing the underlying thoughts rarely succeeds. It simply masks the reaction temporarily. Directing attention to chosen thoughts allows you to interpret experiences in ways that reduce unnecessary emotional turbulence. For example, reframing a challenging situation as an opportunity for growth rather than a personal attack shifts emotional response from fear or frustration to curiosity and engagement. This not only stabilizes mental state, but also improves decision making, resilience, and interpersonal interactions. Controlling the mind through direction cultivates freedom and autonomy. Suppression implies restriction, a narrowing of mental experience that can feel limiting and exhausting. Direction, in contrast, expands the capacity to choose, empowering you to navigate life with intention. It acknowledges that thoughts will arise naturally, but emphasizes mastery in deciding which thoughts guide actions, influence beliefs, and shape perspective. By consistently practicing direction, you develop the ability to prioritize long-term goals over short-term impulses, to respond to challenges thoughtfully rather than reactively, and to construct a life led by purpose rather than distraction. In this sense, control is not the denial of the mind's natural activity. It is the conscious and deliberate steering of that activity to create alignment, consistency, and meaningful outcomes, transforming mental energy into a tool for living intentionally rather than a force that dominates your life.